Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday, the 28th of May, and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 27, season 8 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. Once again, we've gathered together this week's big car retailing stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place, on demand, on your podcast feed.
A few shout-outs this week and a bit of a packed show as well, so get yourself a coffee and take a seat. So, first half, we were joined by Derren Martin, CAP HPI's Director of Valuations, for his roundup of how used values have performed in the month of May.
And we're also joined this morning by Steve Whitten, friend of the podcast, and he's actually giving a live broadcast from London, so more of that in the second half of the show.
And big shout out this week to a friend of the podcast and a guest of the podcast, Mr. David Billsborough from Cheshire Cars, who has hit 1 million views on his YouTube channel. So congratulations, David, with that. I do watch them. I watch the Men in the Shed. I watch your YouTube updates of the market and everything else. So congratulations with that. Fantastic. And I think really for anybody that doesn't do that kind of thing, then I think clearly get in touch with David, because it's a clear example of how we can engage with his audience and through different channels.
Absolutely, definitely. He does a brilliant job, and as a sort of small independent, he does punch above his weight, and that's really reflected in the number of video views that he's attracted now. An amazing achievement. So well done, David.
And we did mention it recently, didn't we, Curtis? The old hashtag Dieselgate. I don't know.
Yeah, we mentioned. Well, in fact, you mentioned the D word last weekend, didn't you?
Yes. And it was the longest hashtag, and it's resurrected itself this week, hasn't it?
It has, yes. We'll cover this in passing, really, but I was picked up by the BBC that the Dieselgate settlement in the UK has actually come in, and the settlement is worth £193 million, and that'll be going to around 91,000 claimants, and that's across VW, Audi, Seat, and Skoda. But what really caught my eye was that there was a lovely tweet from Tim Rose in response to this story. Tim Rose, editor of AM, and he said that he estimated that equated to around £3,000 per claimant, or, as he said, enough for their next PCP deposit. And that got me wondering, will they be putting a deposit down on a Volkswagen? Because I suspect a lot of them will.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, especially a new ID.
I mean, the one thing has been clear all the way through the Dieselgate. It's did a little bit of damage, but VW recovered very, very quickly and have continued to perform, haven't they? So, the brand has still got a significant strength to its audience. So, I mean, that as you say, that is clear. And if you do want to get in touch with us or come on the show or send us a press release, then send it to Motor Trade Radio, get that right, Motor Trade Radio at yahoo.com. And you can also join our Motor Trade Radio LinkedIn group or follow us on Twitter. So do get in touch. And like I said, if you want to come on, want us to do a bit of a shout out or even just send us a press release, then please do so.
So headlines this week, we have got a busy show, but the headlines are from AM, Car Dealer, Motor Trade News, and Auto Retail Agenda. And we'll start with, fairly soon, the big story of the week, which of course is Dash Gupta stepping down as boss of Marshall Motors on the eve of the business delisting. We'll look at 1 in 5 car buyers delaying purchases due to the cost of living crisis reported by eBay Motors Group. Agency models will drive change in used car retailing. Mercedes to sell London retail sites to Sytner. And finally, we'll name the best automotive company to work for, but you'll have to stay tuned until the end to find out who that is.
Yeah, but before we go any further, here's our chat with CAP HPI's Derren Martin on what drove May's used car values.
Good to have you back on, Derren, for our monthly review of used car values. The CAP HBI May editorial has just been published and is available now for listeners to download online. So, can you bring us up to date with the headline figure for that 3 year 60,000 mark for May?
Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, it's what we've described as a bit of a plateauing this month with regards to values. Anyway, there's obviously a lot of detail within that. It's an interesting month, but the headline figure is 0.7% down at 3 years, 60,000 miles. That's off the back of two previous months where both the previous months dropped by 2.1%. So it's definitely a less of a movement down than it has been previously, which I think is quite reassuring for the industry, really.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as you say, I mean that's the sort of the fourth drop in a row now with that zero point 0.7, and like you say, on the back of a sort of 2 months of 2.1%, and I think that takes us down to a 6.6% year to date, doesn't it? I think so. It's not as bad as many people may thinking, but are we seeing a balance of low demand and low supply? Do you think at the minute?
Yeah, that's definitely what's driven it. You've got a pretty unusual situation really, where demand is low, consumer demand is low. We've had lots of conversations with retailers, and a general figure that is being sort of thrown around by them is that business levels are about 70% of where they budgeted them to be or where they wanted them to be. Definitely that's down, but there's not much supply out there. Its supply has been obviously dramatically affected by new car registrations being depleted, by war in Ukraine affecting things, by COVID outbreaks in the Far East that have led to lockdowns and production of parts being affected, which has dramatically affected new car supply. So you're not getting the part exchanges, the fleet returns coming in. So so that's the dynamic really that has led to this sort of plateauing off of values. I think if there was a lot of stock out there with consumer demand being down because of the cost of living concerns and maybe having to make that choice of what they're going to purchase, then you would have had a much further drop down, a much bigger drop. So that has helped keep values high.
And we were talking before we recorded around that sort of condition. And what's your view around what because question whether people are buying damage is the big question, isn't it, at the minute? Is it about that they are buying that ready to retail stuff they can move very quickly, in the risk that they're not going to hold on to it for too long if the market is easing?
Yeah, that's definitely the theme and that tends to always happen when demand does drop. It tends to always be that the nice cars get picked off, and the more damaged cars they do the rounds a little bit more, especially when values have dropped. So over the last couple of months with those drops, are you prepared to buy work when you know that car's going to sit in the workshop, especially if you can't get parts because of the global situation? Then obviously there is a concern there. So it's the nice cars that are selling, the ones that you can get on the forecourt quickly, especially if it's something a little bit different, nice option content, not just a sort of a bog standard car that's out there in volume. Those are the cars that are selling. And the damaged vehicles in the sort of cap average or below, the grades sort of four and five, they're the ones that are sticking and are going around a lot. And when you speak to the auctions, we've got some that are pretty upbeat and doing okay. You can see conversion rates that are okay, and then there are others that are probably dealing in that lower end of the market that have been struggling and not been selling quite so many. So it's very mixed out there, and certainly that 0.7% drop. It is a smallish drop. It's actually the lowest drop the most positive figure in May, apart from last year when obviously we were in a very different situation with values going up. It's since 2009. So it is a reasonable month, but it doesn't feel particularly positive because of the demand and supply situation.
And Derren, you touched on consumer confidence there. What are dealers telling you about consumer confidence, especially in light of the cost of living crisis, and which, as we know, because we report this week on the show, it is influencing buying decisions, because that was revealed in a eBay Motors Group survey. So what are dealers telling you about the level of demand? What are you seeing across the board?
Well, yeah, it's definitely affected things. As I say, level of demand, sort of business levels at about 70%, so 30% down on where they were hoping them to be. People are making a choice. So we've had a holiday period. We've got another holiday coming up next week. And are people going away or buying a car? And you maybe have to make that decision around your summer holidays as well. So yeah, they're having to work harder to get sales in, to get people on the forecourts, to get people on their websites. So there's kind of almost two different ways of looking at it from a dealer's point of view. Some of them are reducing prices, especially on cars that have been a bit sticky and have been in stock for a while, trying to attract people onto their sites, either physical or virtual. And then there are others that are holding firm, but I would say both sets of those are probably reducing the transactional prices. So when they've got a customer in and they're maybe wavering, or there's a bit of negotiation going on, they're negotiating on from that advertised price a little bit more than they have done over the last year or so, because last year didn't really need to do that. The demand was plentiful, and you could easily sell the vehicles. Now they're having to work much harder for that. But not everybody is reducing advertised prices, but some are. Does that have an effect? I guess it's a bit mixed, really, on whether that will encourage people to still buy, or are they going to put off that big purchase? We've also seen that bottom end of the market, so sort of the sub £5,000 car, they've actually dropped in price this month, which is quite unusual for this year. They've actually been the strongest all the way through. Maybe that lower end, those buyers at that bottom end are more affected by the cost of living crisis, and they've not been. So that's why prices there have been affected. We've also seen diesel, especially in that older end, those sort of Euro 4 cars with high road fund licence and the high cost of diesel, they've been affected as well. So that bottom end has suffered a little bit more in percentage terms anyway.
And we know that the 0.7% down is obviously the overall average at that 3-year 60, but within that there's obviously notable movements around different sectors, aren't there? And obviously around the vehicle types and age. So you've got your 2.4% down at 10-year 100,000 mile, albeit in monetary terms it will be a lot less. What can you share in terms of listeners around what's been happening in the sort of notable movements around where the strength and weaknesses is by the sectors? Because I think SUV and MPV are under a little bit of pressure at the minute, aren't they?
Yeah, they are to a degree. I'd say that on a positive note, city cars have gone up in value. So that cheaper car has gone up slightly in value. So maybe people downsizing, and we hear about that quite a lot. People cashing in on what their car is worth and downsizing potentially for their second car. So city cars have done okay, but maybe people aren't quite downsizing to that over 10-year-old car which has been affected. Convertibles, they've gone up as well this month. The sun's been shining at certain points in time. Anyway,
I was going to say that. I'm not sure about today, but yeah.
Yeah. So convertibles, they've gone up a little bit later than they have done in previous years, and probably not by as much, but that's off the back of the fact that they've been strong for quite some time now, with values going up last year. But yeah, the ones that have been affected the most, I would say MPV, that's gone down 1.4%, so double the average. You've got some cars in there that they're the ones that went up by the most over the last year or so, as we've talked about that quite a lot with MPVs being price point cars and reasonably priced. They went up by a lot, and that's what you're seeing is the cars that have gone up by the most potentially coming down by the most. SUV is an interesting one because that's a huge sector now, a huge segment of the market, and there's different size of SUVs, obviously, and we've seen some of those larger ones that have been affected a little bit more this month, whereas the smaller SUV has only come down by 0.6%. So that cheaper end have maybe been doing okay. We're still seeing that 15 to 30 price range struggling a little bit. Those are the ones that went up, as I say, by the most. They look expensive, some of those cars, and some of those have come down. And some examples of cars that have come down: I-Pace has come down this month. Tiguan, CX-5, XC60 and 90 have all come down by more than the average. So some of those cars that maybe look a little bit expensive have come down.
And in terms of fuel trends, trends around fuel types, you mentioned older diesels are under pressure. Any other notable trends over the course of the month, especially in electric and plug-in hybrids?
Yeah, well, so diesels they have come down by the most across all age bands, and I think, as I said, there's a decision to be made there on whether you still want a diesel. And it has been a trend for a couple of months now. You need to make the right choice. If you're doing the miles, it probably makes sense. If you're not doing the miles, maybe it doesn't. Electric vehicles have been quite mixed. Tesla itself has been quite mixed, where we've seen Model 3 going up in value by 4%, so not insignificant at all, whereas Model S has come down by about 4%. And I think that's just down to sort of desirability and maybe availability of the new Model 3. It's the cheaper car, and I think Tesla have switched most of their production to Model Y now. So if you want a Model 3 and you can't get a new one, then that's driven some of that. We've also seen at the lower end, so the Honda E has gone up by, I think, 3%, over £700. Smart 44 has gone up as well. So we are seeing some increased activity in that EV world, which is not really surprising, bearing in mind that it's kind of everywhere in the press about electric vehicles and much more under consideration now.
But and I noticed the I-Pace has come down, and that's quite a significant amount, isn't it?
Yeah, the I-Pace has kind of come down. Yes, there's been some a little bit more. There's a little bit more volume of that out there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a continual trend. I think that it will probably stabilise. But yeah, there's not been a shortage of those out there, and some keen pricing, which is what's led to that drop.
Yeah.
And the big question, Derren, I mean, we're at 6.6% down year to date. Very difficult to compare with the last 2 years, because at the same point, I think last year we were at 4.5%, which was just the start of when we started to see that acceleration of values. And pre-pandemic 2019, we were down 9.3. So in fairness to the pre-pandemic levels, we're not in a very bad position in terms of that drop. But more importantly, we've seen this ease in. We know that supply isn't necessarily there on the horizon in any significant volumes. Still got the pressures around cost of living and the demand element, but people still want cars, and still dealers need vehicles on their forecourt. So what are your expectations now over the sort of coming weeks as we go through a long bank holiday due next week, and then obviously we're into that potential holiday period as we move forward?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting next week, because obviously you've got a 3-day working week, and there are some dealers that are buying a bit of stock in the sort of the hope that people might use that holiday period to go out and look for a new car. I think it will probably be a bit of a downturn next week, and then may recover the week after with regards to demand. I mean, the cost of living crisis, it's not going away anytime soon, so that is obviously going to have an impact. But generally, in times of I don't want to use the word, but in times of recession, used cars do well. People do switch to used cars, and there can be some greater uptake there. Supply is not going to recover anytime soon. New car supply seems as bad as ever. There's long lead times, 18 months, 24 months sometimes on lead times, and that has been affected obviously by the war in Ukraine and by events in the Far East. So I don't think supply is going to increase anytime soon. Cost of living and demand, what effect that has? Could that lead to lower demand? Yes, potentially. But my personal view is that things will be fairly stable for the next 2 or 3 months, really, just because of that supply level, those supply levels. You might see car buying services maybe ramping things up a little bit, trying to get extra cars in, because because there is a shortage out there. So It's going to be some interesting dynamics, but I think that supply levels are not going to go up dramatically to cause any sort of crash in values, even if demand is reduced and is sort of curtailed a little bit.
So I suppose, really, do you think that we're going to go through this period of sort of, as you say, slight downturn in values, but not dramatic, that we are heading on that downward trajectory, but it's maybe slower than expected because of what you've just gone through?
Yeah, I think values. I mean, values do tend to come down. That is a factor of life. That cars depreciate and you get deflation in used car values. Last year was an anomaly. That it's unusual for them to go up, and this 0.7% shouldn't be seen as a huge negative, because that's a fairly, as I said, that's a fairly positive movement. So, but we've still got about 70 models that are above new car list at 1 year old. That doesn't really seem sustainable. Cars are expensive, so it is quite likely that we'll have a period of stability, but values could drop to a degree. There'll obviously be lots of things within that, with some cars that go up in value, some cars that do come down by more than that. We have got cars that have come down by around 14% over the last 3 months, which
probably went up by 35% last year.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're still way ahead of where they were, and we've been having a look at what cars were worth 3 years ago compared to now, pre-COVID, and there's cars in there that are sort of 30-40% ahead of where they were that 3 years ago at the same age and mileage point. So there's lots of dynamics within that. But yeah, we have got, as I say, we've got cars that have dropped over the last 3 months, like the Mocha, the C-Max. They've come down by sort of 13 or 14%. So you can definitely see things where there has been a little bit of a realignment. So yeah, it's I would expect the average figure to be fairly small, but within that, where there's more supply, where there are cars coming through, then that could affect things.
Yeah, I suppose more than ever there's a need for live figures, because the speed in which it's moving on a daily and weekly basis, but actually the variance of those movements behind that headline figure is probably more significant than ever as well, as I suspect.
Yeah, when you'll get cars that barely move or don't move at all. We don't move values unless there's the evidence to do it. And yeah, within the live values, then yeah, it's really important that you keep a check on things. I mean, last year, if you weren't putting prices up on a regular basis, then looking at the live figures, then you wouldn't have been making as much money as you could have done. And when they're falling, yeah, you need to just make sure that you're checking on if you're buying or selling, you're just checking on those daily figures, which see we're all over with the data that we get in regularly. But yeah, there are some cars that are coming down quicker, but they do tend to be the ones that went up by the most, or where there's plentiful supply.
And Derren, just following up on something you said there about the 2 bank holidays that are coming up over the coming week. Oh, the dealers that you're talking to, are they anticipating an increase in demand over those 2 days? Because it's unusual to have those holidays. It's a bit of a one-off. So what's the view out there that you're picking up on?
It's mixed, really. I think there are certainly some that will expect it to be pretty slow. It could well be weather dependent as well, to be honest. If we get a nice sunny weekend, then people will probably not want to be out hunting a car. If it's not so great, then maybe people will be online and looking. So I think there are some that are being a little bit cautious and stocking up a little bit, but I would say that probably they're prepared for it to be not great, and then pick up again after that. That would be, I think, what they're probably looking at.
Yeah, I suspect there'll be a lot of buyers possibly heading online and doing a bit of research over the bank holidays, but not necessarily on forecourts.
Yeah, probably.
Well, look, Derren, many thanks for coming back on the podcast. And just a reminder to listeners that the editorial is available at CAP HPI's website. So that's cap-hpi.com. So that's available now. You can view it online or download it. But do come back on the show next month and tell us how June panned out. So many thanks, Derren.
It's a pleasure. Do you not want to know how the Zafira's done?
I was going to mention that right at the end.
Yeah.
Actually. Go on.
Sophia has come down by a couple of percent again. So it's now actually come down by 12% in the last 3 months. So it continues to head south. But I'd have been worried if I was a bit worried that you hadn't asked about that one, Curtis.
Well, you know, I've sold them all, so I haven't got any on the drive anymore.
like
So they've all gone. I managed to sell when they were high.
It's a bit like tech shares, isn't it?
Yes.
No, but as always, Derren, it's a pleasure having you on. It's always great chatting through this, and I think one thing I've taken from this is it's an air of caution, but not disaster at the minute. That it's about keeping an eye on both markets, both retail and trade, buying cautiously and understanding daily what's happening in the marketplace more than ever. So I think that's a clear message from today to the listeners. So thanks for joining us again, as always.
No, pleasure. Speak to you soon.
So, Phil, that's very much steady as she goes, isn't it? 0.7 drop in May. That's pretty much, as Derren says, that's showing signs of plateauing now.
Yeah, new word of reference now for the used car
Yes,
market. Again, plateau. So we keep getting these new ones, don't we, entering the sector. But again, as he said, there's a lot of noise behind those headline figures, and he does caution. And I think clearly, as Derren and yourself said, we're heading into a period of long bank holiday and a little bit of weather and holidays, etc.
Yes.
So we may see a little bit of slowdown further in the short term, but fairly stable as we go forward, because as we know, the headwinds still facing the new vehicle market are still causing challenges in the used vehicle supply, and therefore, although demand has eased, as we know, supply continues to outweigh the drop in demand. So again, out of caution there, but a very stable market. So,
yeah, and also some useful context there, because he does make the point that that drop of 0.7 is actually one of the smallest for the month on record. So yeah, it's just going to be fascinating to see how the coming months play out now.
And as you said earlier, a big story of the week, and we covered it on AM Online, is that our friend of the show and guest of the show, we've not had him on for a while. We might not be able to get him on for a while yet, maybe, but he's keeps posting what he's doing on his each day at the minute. But our friend is Dash Gupta, Marshall Motor Group CEO. Dash Gupta exits business with immediate effect. Now, this is that Dash Gupta, who, as I say, is chief executive of Marshall's Motor Group, has stepped down with immediate effect. And as you say, they're just ahead of the delisting of the group following the acquisition by Constellation.
Yeah, and Dash, of course, took to social media. He posted on LinkedIn and Twitter about his decision to step down, the reasons behind it. And it's sad to see him go, because he has led the business since 2008, and every time that I interviewed him, he reminds me that I was one of the first journalists to go up to Cambridge to interview him back in 2008. And I must say, at the time, Marshall's was a fairly small and quiet, family-owned regional group. It was almost like Sleepy Hollow going up there, and sitting down with Dash all those years ago, and he outlined his thoughts behind expanding the group and giving it more of a national footprint. And true to his words, he delivered. Plus,
yeah. I mean, like I say, if you haven't seen his update on LinkedIn, that sort of shows his career, or is it a CV? But it's a fantastic legacy that he's left there, and the growth of the business and where it is today. And clearly, I think, before we head back to the story there, that I think Dash had put a comment about the power of social media, that once he'd put his post out about him stepping down from the position, that I think he'd had 100,000 views on the post.
yes.
I think he's up to 867 comments, and knowing Dash, he is trying to respond and acknowledge every single comment on it. So, I think that's a little bit of work there on that social. I wonder if he's got any help doing that at the minute, just to make sure he's responding to everybody. But again, we did shout out to him that he's welcome back on. The door is open as and when he wants to come back onto the show to share something, some news, I suppose,
Yeah.
in many ways.
Yeah, most definitely. And I was amused that he's actually been posting what he's been doing since the news on days 1, 2, and 3. And I think day 2, he was taking the dog for a walk. Day 3, he was visiting a farm. So making the most of sort of some downtime, which, he must really be appreciating.
Yeah, and it is a great story in AM Online, and like I say, great update from Dash there on his LinkedIn. So please do check that out, and it'll give you sort of a bit of the background and legacy behind what he's achieved at Marshalls there. And just heading over to the AM Online again is that a story here from eBay Motors Group, who power the podcast, and 1 in 5 car buyers delaying purchase due to cost of living crisis. Now, we talked about this, didn't we, on the interview with Derren, in terms of that impact of the cost of living. But this is some research that eBay Motors Group have done with their panel customers.
It is, yeah. I worked with the guys on this release, and there's some fascinating stats. So 70% of purchases will be impacted in some way by the cost of living crisis, and this is according to research. It was only done in April, so it's pretty fresh. And so that 70% of purchases will be impacted. What does that mean? And that's very much buyers thinking about buying cheaper or smaller cars, and indeed 1 in 5 buyers claim they will delay their next purchase altogether, and 28% say that the rises to their energy bills will not influence the decision to buy. So it is showing the impact that these changes are having. And I do urge you to check out the AM story because it is very detailed. But just to give you some of the data behind that. So the rise in energy bills prompted nearly a quarter, so that was 23% of, these are in-market buyers of new and used cars, so it prompted nearly a quarter to say they will delay their next purchase. A further 29% said they will now buy a cheaper car, and 20% will buy a smaller one. And as I say, 28% say that the rise would not influence their decision. So that could be that they're so far down the purchasing decision that they are staying committed to the purchase they were looking at.
Yeah.
And when asked how the general cost of living increases would affect their next car purchase, a similar trend actually emerged. So 23% said they will delay, 30% said they will buy a cheaper car, and 19% are now looking for a smaller car. So some interesting stats there.
Yeah, and like you say, Derren alluded to it, sort of that sub 5K market has kind of been affected now for the first time for this year. That
Yes.
was the strong market, but that is actually showing a bit of weakness now as this sort of cost of living impact starts to take effect. And we know this week that the government have issued some one-off payments. And interesting in the story that we must give a shout out to this, that they do cite in the story that Sandycliff Motors Group actually handed a special payment of £500 per employee to help them with the rising cost of living, and talked to Paul Woodhouse told who's the managing director, said that you don't have to just go as far to see something in the news about the rising costs, whether it's energy or food. So with this in mind, we will be making a payment for an additional £500 to all employees. I mean, what a fantastic that is by those guys.
Yeah, definitely.
And moving over to Motor Trade News, a story here, which is about agency model will drive change in used car retailing. So you and I have spoke about agency model. We've had people like Steve Young on from ICDP talking about agency model. But actually, what's cited in this story from Motor Nova is that it's about the used vehicle impact, isn't it? As the agency model gathers traction, we hear more and more about this transition by certain OEMs across to agency model. But actually, what does that mean for the used vehicle marketplace?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So some interesting comments here from Motor Novo Finance's commercial director, Debbie McKay. And as you say, it's very much focused on what it means to the used car market, both franchised and independent. And the story kicks off with, BMW understood to be the latest manufacturer set to embrace an agency model. And we know that Mercedes are looking at it. And we'll get back to Mercedes soon. Cupra, Smart. There's a number of brands looking at agency now. And it's really looking at how this will impact the used car proposition of the franchise dealers. And within the piece, it is pointed out that with this inevitable shrinking of the size of dealer networks as a result of agency, some dealers are looking increasingly to beef up their used car propositions. And we've seen this, we've reported on it, and this emergence of used vehicle sub-brands from the likes of Pendragon, Arnold Clark, Virtue, Peter Vardy, Inchcape. The list is getting longer and longer. But what really interested me within this story was the comment from Debbie McKay, who says, we already see the emergence of used car vehicle sub-brands from established dealer groups aiming to combine franchise credibility to their used operations. While free of franchise standards, these sub-brands are designed to leverage the credibility and inherent value of the franchise-type proposition. And she goes on to say that there are implications here for traditional independent dealers for whom it will mean further evolution. And she says, I'm sure many will lift their game as they did during the successive lockdown challenges. The opportunity to package their service and agility attributes to add a new level of trust and relevance there. So an interesting perspective on how what is shaking up the franchise model will actually have ramifications for independent dealers as well.
Yeah, I think that's the point, and I think we've touched on it a couple of times, where the view that the agency model is for new vehicles, it's not. It's they will be looking at ring fencing their products, in the 0 to 6, 0 to 12, 0 to 18, and even up to 24-month product that's in their control, because essentially you are talking to the same customers in that sort of nearly new to the new vehicle marketplace. So it makes sense. So again, a lot of that product from the manufacturers, the OEMs, will be ring fenced within their agency partners. To ensure that they maximise that relationship with customers, which then that makes that the independents may have to look into that older marketplace, as well as the franchise dealers may have to do the same as well to look at those revenue opportunities. So it is going to shake up the market for the future.
You're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed. And now it's time for our regular Men-Able moment from our very own automotive wellbeing guru, Steve Whitten. And he's reporting live from London at the Water Cooler Workplace Wellbeing Show. Over to you, Steve.
Yeah, hi Curtis, hi Phil, and yes, another Men-Able Moments. This week I'm coming to you from Kensington Olympia, where I'm actually at an event called the Water Cooler, which is all about connecting workplace wellbeing solutions. And I've got to say, I'm bloody exhausted. Not only is it all about walking around this thing and having lots of chats and stuff, but what I've realised is that this area of well-being and mental health is absolutely saturated, and it's just everywhere you look. There is an app, or there is a solution, or there is a program, or something that you can tap into to help with mental health and well-being across your business. And I can't help but think, if I was a leader again in an automotive business, in a car dealership, for example, I genuinely would not know where to look. I would be thinking to myself, I know I've got to do something around well-being and look after the mental health of my team, but there's just so much out there, I don't know where to start. But actually, it's also dawned on me that when I talk to a lot of these suppliers and providers of these services and talk about the work that they do in other industries, I don't think we're in a bad place, I really don't. I think in our industry, certainly in the last 18 months or so, we've achieved a huge amount in raising awareness and opening up the issue and getting people talking about it, getting educated and so on. But what clearly seems to happen, and I say this obviously from our perspective, from a Men Able Moments perspective, if you like, is I think, picking up on our conversation last time where we talked about celebrating mental health, that what we really need to be doing is focusing on our strengths. And it's very, very easy to think of mental health and think it's all about our weaknesses and the bits where it's going wrong, the bits where it ain't happening and the help that we need. But actually, let's think about this. We are supposedly one of the most sophisticated species on the planet, and it's our mental health that's got us there. It's our resilience, it's our strength, it's our ability to communicate, it's our ability to connect with each other and our ability to support, help and love each other. So I know there's that word love again. I know you won't like that, Phil, but chucked it in. I could have mentioned spirituality, but I resisted. But yeah, so we really are, I think, in a really, really good place. So that might sound odd coming from me, and, we're focusing on mental health and well-being. But I think, at the end of the day, like I said last week, let's celebrate where we're at and let's think about all the diverse things that we come across in terms of diversity of people and the types of people we work with and interact with, and all of those mental health and things that come up in terms of different people's personalities, and celebrate that and work with it and understand it. And it means that as managers and leaders, perhaps it's time to take a little bit of a step back and not think about the data, not think about the key performance indicators and trying to put measures on it. Although clearly, there is some measures there that are important. But actually to also think about how we work to the strengths that we have and the strengths that we have in our teams. And as an example, I've got somebody working with me at the moment who has ADHD. And I said to them a couple of weeks ago, how do we work with you? What do you want us to do that helps with your needs in that respect? And she said to me, that's the first time anyone's ever mentioned that or ever asked the question. And I said, well, I don't know where it came from, actually. It just felt like it was the right thing to say or do. But what it did was opened up a conversation about how we support somebody with very different needs. And that's a strength. That really is a strength, because when you tap into that, you realise that all of us are different. All of us have your own unique personalities, our own unique strengths. And let's play to that and let's celebrate it. Now, I'm leaving this water cooler event absolutely exhausted, so I'm going to go and sit on a train and probably nod off, so get my strengths back. I'll see you next time. Take care.
Well, I really hope he woke up on that train before he got.
He probably didn't. He probably went past his stop on it. Yeah,
yes, he's probably up in Scotland now.
It's I mean, he likes to get the word spiritual in there, doesn't he? I think
he does, yeah, and spreading the love as well.
Yes,
there's some great comments there from Steve, and returning to his theme about celebrating mental health and removing some of the taboos around mental health. So many thanks, Steve, and you can of course get in touch with Steve on LinkedIn and Twitter. He's very visible. Just look for Men Able or Stephen Witten.
Sounded very busy there as well, didn't it?
He did, yeah. He that was all one take as well, wasn't it? Well, it was live. It was live.
Yeah. So moving back on then to the headline. So auto retail agenda, and we sort of alluded to it earlier in the previous story there, that Mercedes to sell London retail sites to Sytner. So this is come from Sytner. Have not commented on this, but this is come from Mercedes-Benz that they are nearing its aim to exiting retail in the UK with the sale of most of its London franchise sites to Sytner Group. And this is the US giant Penske Automotive Group, who we know owns Sytner's, is understood to have signed an agreement to buy North London dealerships of Mercedes-Benz Retail Group, with completion of the deal expected to be in the third quarter of this year. So again, this is the Chelsea, Heathrow and Stratford locations. So again, the kind of it feels like that this is the move towards that agency, coming away from their own retail sites and moving them into their preferred partners that they will be aligning to under the world of agency models. So what are your thoughts on this one, Curtis?
It really is a fascinating development, this, because the story actually identifies that Mercedes actually started this process back in 2016 when you might recall it sold its Manchester and Birmingham markets operations to LSH, the Chinese-owned group. And there has been talk about what it plans to do with the rest of Mercedes retail group. So the story goes on to say that rumours of the sale of the London dealerships have actually been circulating ever since. And the manufacturer had stated in 2021 that it was examining the potential sale of Mercedes-Benz retail group. And just to recap, Mercedes operated 9 showrooms in London until the end of last year when it sold its Epsom business to Sandown Motors. Mercedes-Benz World in Weybridge, that incredible facility there. So that's part of the manufacturer's retail group, and also the South London sites in Croydon, West Bromley, and Dartford are not included in the sale to Sytner. That's made very clear in this story. But what would this mean to Sytner? Well, Sytner is currently the biggest Mercedes-Benz partner in the UK with 14 franchises. So it really does consolidate Sytner's position there with the brand.
Definitely. And it's a fantastic move there and great opportunity there for Sytner's with the growth of that partnership. But continuing on the subject of Mercedes and going over to car dealer, Mercedes-Benz to cut 10% of dealerships as part of the switch to agency. So on the back of what we've just been discussing there and the rumours that they've obviously sold these businesses across to Sytner, but not all of them, it then raises this question about this consolidation and this partnership of their network as we move towards agency. And this is obviously that there's reports that the 10% of the Mercedes dealers will be cut. I suppose the question is how many of them are their own dealers as well. But this is across the market, isn't it? This is over. Is it that dealers in Germany most at risk with 20% facing the axe in the next 6 years? But I think if anybody understands that Mercedes marketplace, it's they have a lot of franchise dealers over in Germany, Curtis, significant amounts.
Yeah, and some of those dealers will be feeling a bit vulnerable at the moment. But it's worth adding that this is a global story. This doesn't apply to any one market. So this cut of 10% of dealers is across the globe. So the plan includes rolling the agency model out to 20 global markets in the next 3 years. Despite it currently only being used in 5 markets. But we can see that coming. And I think actually Robert Forrester, when we interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, he said that Mercedes were one of the brands, along with Cupra, who will be adopting agency model within the Virtue network. So interesting developments here. We're going to be hearing a lot more on this. And it does actually come on the back of, this week we saw the relaunch of the Smart brand, which is obviously owned as part of the Mercedes-Benz group internationally. And that's being relaunched very much as a sort of online brand, adopting that sort of agency model.
Yeah. And they do cite in the story there again, this is shortly after the news came, less than a week after Stellantis also announced plans to adopt agency sales throughout its European dealer network. And we've talked about that before when they started to reissue contracts and things like this that, I think it was, I can't remember, there was 3 tiers, weren't there, of whether you got a renew license or you under review or you were exiting the Stellantis brands, and they're obviously clearly moving very quickly now with all this agency across many of the manufacturers, albeit some are saying that they won't move to agency. So again, I think we're going to be talking about this one for a long time yet, Curtis.
Yeah, and I know I've mentioned it already, but if you didn't catch that interview with Robert Forrester, it is worth heading over there, because he does actually offer a masterclass in agency, and he actually points out that, you know, as far as he's concerned, agency has existed for a long time, with the way that the manufacturer-owned parts distribution businesses are run through dealer groups, you know, the likes of VW's, TPS, and Ford's Plus parts. So you know, that is still available on your podcast feed.
And the way they operate in leasing as well. You know, it's not kind of new that process, but again, I think he quite welcomes it from that chat.
Yes.
So the final story for this week is Motorpoint named Best Automotive Company to work for. So congratulations, guys, there at Motorpoint. The Best Companies League has placed independent car and van retailer Motorpoint as its top automotive company to work for. So fantastic news for those guys there. And I suspect CEO Mark Carpenter is over the moon with this one.
Yeah, definitely. And this was the second year in a row that Motorpoint has actually won this accolade. And within the automotive sector, so Motorpoint beat Mercedes-Benz Southwest, who came in third place, Bayliss Group, who came in fifth, Finders Group in seventh, and also within automotive, there were Kia Motors UK, who were actually placed second in the ranking, and Cox Automotive, who took fourth place. So, you know, congratulations to all those brands. There's some really strong showings there.
Yeah, no, I can confirm. Cox Automotive is a nice place to work, and I can imagine, knowing that people at Mortarpoint, you can see why. I mean, they've done a fantastic job over recent years as well, with expansion and growth and investment and diversity of what they've done in the sector. So congratulations to all those involved with that. But that's it for this week. So quite a long one with the interview there with Derren Martin, but I hope you found that interview extremely useful and reassuring in many ways, to get a sort of little bit of context behind the headlines that have been hitting the media on the back of the announcement of the valuations, and obviously a bit of context of what's to come. Great little chat there. Thank you again, Steve, for your update. And like I say, I hope you got home okay and you've managed to get some rest. So, and like I say, as always, please do head over to some of the headlines we've discussed and check out the other press releases and updates that have been announced this week. But hopefully we'll try and continue to bring you the big ones. But that's it for this week.
Yeah, that's all for now. I mean, I think, like Steve Whitten, I'm going to go and lie down in a minute.
That long one.
Yeah. But yeah, that is all for now. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. Many thanks for joining us for all the chatter that matters. We're back again next week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.